I think we have to become preppers. I think that's the facts. We are either going to be prepared ourselves, or we should be prepared to be disappointed and be devastated by the unforeseen. Hi there, friends, fans, and foes of Dad Saves America. John Popola here, and I thought I would take this Friday to recognize and try to dissect a multi-layered tragedy taking place in the southeast of the United States, in Florida up through North Carolina, with the hurricanes, both Helene and now Milton, that have been devastating communities and exposing, yet again, federal government incompetence and failure. It's more complicated than most people think, and I think the commentary in politics happening right now is missing the point, and it's missing the lessons I really hope someday we can learn about why this stuff never works. So let's take a look at the statement from Mayorkas that really triggered a lot of different responses, all rightfully outraged, but some kind of unproductive and missing the point.
We do not have the funds. FEMA does not have the funds to make it through the season.
FEMA does not have the funds to make it through the season. This statement and the subsequent commentary that followed really set off a firestorm, right? It became, why doesn't FEMA have the funds? Where are the funds? Many have claimed it's the wars overseas, or its funds have been diverted to migrants and illegal immigrants coming over to get Obama phones and expensive hotels and sapping resources in all sorts of ways. Flights paid for by the federal government, all of which is crazy, but it is missing the point. So let's start with a simple fact, and that is that the United States federal government spends a monstrous amount of money, an ungodly amount of money, more money than ever before, more money than any government has ever spent. Let's take a quick look. Welcome to fiscaldata.treasury.gov, where sanity goes to die. Let's take a look at what's going on just in the past 12 months of Uncle Sam's budget, paid for by all of us and, looking into the future, our children and grandchildren. Here we go. I'll keep this short. For 2024, Uncle Sam is spending close to $6.5 trillion with a T. That is up $800 billion from last year. $800 billion. Where did Uncle Sam spend all that money? Almost $2 trillion of which has been borrowed, by the way, an unprecedented non-recession deficit. Well, if you scroll on down, what you can see is that the federal budget looks nothing like anyone understands or talks about in the media or the news ever. 21% to Social Security, 14% to Medicare. The third largest line item in the federal budget is net interest on the federal debt, 13%. What does that mean in dollar terms? Because it is bigger than national defense. So all of our various adventures all around the world are costing less than our interest payments on the national debt. This is like nation-ending fiscal disaster type of stuff. But since we are the world's tallest pygmy, we continue to get to do this for now. In dollar terms, that is $843 billion in interest. And as you can see, we are spending a lot of money on a lot of stuff. So the notion here that FEMA doesn't have the funds or shouldn't have access to the funds is crazy. FEMA isn't underfunded because we're spending money on migrants. We shouldn't be funding people who come here illegally in any way. That is crazy talk. But for now, FEMA isn't being starved by migrants. FEMA isn't being starved by the war in Ukraine or support for the Israelis or the battles in Yemen or whatever other crazy cockamamie stuff we're doing all around the world. As a mostly right-winger myself, It tends to be my friends that look at these issues in this way. And I try my best to be an honest broker to you. That's what I'm here to do. And so I'm here to say it's just not an honest way to look at the problems we're facing. It is an enormous, tremendous, nation-destroying problem that these agencies waste our money, that the government is running massive deficits like they can go without end. But the reason FEMA sucks is much deeper than that, actually. It sucks because it does two other things that are deeply, deeply harmful to us as a community and to the things it claims it's supposed to do. The first of which is it physically gets in the way of people doing the job better than it.
There's a large operation here happening at the Harley-Davidson in Swannanoa. What started with a social media post turned into the Savage Freedom Ops Organization.
You know, the Savage Freedom Ops Organization. These are the guys we have to turn to.
More commonly known as the Redneck Air Force.
It keeps getting better. The Redneck Air Force. I'm a Yankee, but I'm with the Redneck Air Force on this one.
Delivering supplies to communities all over the mountains.
Mostly special ops veterans of various parts of our military all come here in Swannanoa, North Carolina to help. Literally 30 helicopters have come in and out this morning. These choppers are going in, lifting in aid to residents over these mountains that are cut off from roads. They're getting the work done here, I gotta say. The man in charge is Adam Smith. He's a former Green Beret.
This is like the best of America, right? This is what Alexis de Tocqueville saw in this country when he came here from France and wrote his book, Democracy in America. He wasn't talking about voting. He was talking about the sense in which Americans just roll up our sleeves and get things done. We don't wait around for aristocrats or government agencies to step in and do the work. We know we ultimately have to do it for ourselves. But this is an ethos that has weakened over time because of agencies like FEMA.
How would you characterize the federal response here? How has it been since the beginning?
Incompetent, if we're talking about broadly speaking. Limited to no personnel. There's not been dedicated assistance or support. I've not seen one FEMA individual come through this location. I've not seen one FEMA truck in this town.
These guys, again, are coming in trying to figure out what the problem is and who's in charge while we're solving the problems. People don't care what's going to happen 2 weeks from now when they're starving. They need food, they need water, they need warmth. They don't need a government official saying, we're going to fix this.
So this clip is a couple days old, but it does point to the fact that right out of the gate, the agency that's charged with being uniquely suited and always at the ready to help Americans in the face of these kinds of tragedies was just slow off the starting block. It just isn't competent.
But one Pageland man's efforts to help are now the source of controversy. He flew his own chopper on his own dime to help stranded victims. But that man says he abandoned his rescue missions after a fire official threatened to have him thrown in jail.
I was greeted by the, at that time I didn't know, but Lake Lure fire chief or assistant chief maybe, and he shut down the whole operation. At that point I asked him, you know, what was the reason I had to leave them there, and he said, again, you're interfering with my operation. I just need you to get out of the area. I said, sir, I don't know where you were trained at, but I know how my training is, and I'm not going to leave personnel behind. I'm going back to get my co-pilot. He said, if you turn around and go back up the mountain, you're going to be arrested.
We've seen this time and again, especially in times of acute crisis, when there is chaos, where there is a multitude of needs. These agencies, these giant lumbering bureaucracies, come in and say, step aside, we're in charge. Now, this might have been the local fire department, but this has been true time and again. This was true in the immediate aftermath of COVID with the FDA and the CDC, actively undermining people that were providing testing cheaper and faster, providing hand washing solutions when all of the capacity had been broken down. They don't want us to help ourselves. They want to be in charge. Some of that is just plain old power mongering, but the reasons why this happens are more profound than most people, I think, talk about or realize. As we sit here today, this is 50 years anniversary this week of the Nobel Prize for Friedrich Hayek. He is the free market economist whose concepts inform my thinking probably more than anyone else. And at the heart of Hayek is this question of who should plan for whom. Who knows what to do when and where? He called this the knowledge problem. And it is the reason why, even if we have the best intended bureaucrats and central planners in our government, they can't actually do the job. Not won't, can't. Why is that? Why can't they? Well, let me just say this. These guys, the Redneck Air Force, and many of the other people who've stepped into the breach, they are former government employees, many of them. They're men of the military. They are people who are part of the federal government or used to be. So it isn't the case that there aren't any good people working in the government. FEMA itself is staffed with, I'm sure, thousands of people who are well-intended, are stressing out with every hurricane season, are doing their best to try to make things happen. It isn't for lack of trying. It isn't for lack of funding. It's for lack of knowledge. The problem is, for one thing, all of these people have the same 24-hour day as you and I. Mayorkas has the same 24-hour day as you or I. So does Joe Biden, although his might be a little shorter. Same thing with Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. But the issue is no central authority can gather all the knowledge and process it and act on it in times like this, in times of complex social crisis, because that knowledge is dispersed among all the people involved. It is particular to their circumstances, their neighborhood and what it needs, their particular set of needs as a family, as an individual. And so any attempt to centralize the plan gives rise to a couple things. One, the plans turn out to be wrong. And there's an example from another catastrophe that I think is very illustrative. Back in 2018, there was a terrible storm that hit Puerto Rico. Among many other things, there was a concern about the availability of potable water, and so tens of thousands of pallets of water bottles were sent to Puerto Rico, stacked high, and left to turn into a bacteria-filled wasteland. This is the graveyard of failed central plans in that particular catastrophe. Again, great intentions, reasonable idea, send them water bottles. It all makes sense, but when you get to the boots on the ground, the battlefield destroys your central plans. Our history of natural disasters and disasters of all kinds, disasters of foreign adventures to try to build up other countries like Afghanistan and Iraq, they all end in centrally planned catastrophe. We aren't able to do it. We can't build societies from the top down. It's not possible. But you might be thinking, hey, our government's done big things. What are you talking about? In fact, there was an ad campaign in the aftermath of the great financial crisis of 2008 that I think really captures the ethos here. And I don't think it's just a progressive left ethos. I think it's much more deeply embedded in the American psyche than we realize.
When you are this close to Hoover Dam, it makes you realize how small a human is in relation to this as a human project. You can't be the guy who builds this. You can't be the town who builds this. You can't even be the state who builds this. You have to be the country that builds something like this.
I mean, the first weird part is, what are you talking about? I mean, the Wright brothers invented aeronautics. They're just two guys in a bicycle shop, and they figured out how to get people to fly. Elon Musk is not one man, he's an entire company, but he's made SpaceX put rockets into space and basically shown all of the military industry who's boss when it comes to how to do space flight. Only the nation can build a dam? That is almost certainly false. But there is a point.
This is a national project. This is a project of national significance. We've got those projects on the menu right now, and we've got to figure out whether or not we are still a country that can think this big.
This is really what animates so much of big government desire. We've seen government do big things. We've seen the Hoover Dam or the Tennessee Valley Authority by the FDR administration as part of the New Deal, try to electrify the South, or the Manhattan Project. How many times have you heard, we need a Manhattan Project? We need a Manhattan Project for cancer. We need a Manhattan Project for insert the problem to be solved. The problem is, the reason why we don't have more Manhattan Projects or Hoover Dams, or of course, going to the moon, is that these aren't the kind of complex problems that a natural disaster and the rebuilding of a society or a man-made disaster and the rebuilding of a different society are like. They're not the same thing. All of these big projects that have been lionized in our culture, not just on the left, but in our culture more broadly, are engineering problems. They are not complex systems. They're complicated, but they're not complex. What do I mean by that? You can design a car or a rocket or a dam with a couple really smart people and a calculator. That is how that happens. And then you can marshal the resources to execute that plan. See, the complexity in social problems is that the problem is comprised of people. People aren't things that can be moved around and designed on paper and stay put. We have constantly changing needs, desires, and problems. But I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Popola, you're just a libertarian ideologue that hates the government, even when it's trying to do the things that it's best at doing or that we need it to do because no one else will step in. History is instructive because a disaster of even greater proportions hit one of our biggest cities in 1871. There was a fire in the city of Chicago that was truly catastrophic. Over 18,000 homes in the city were destroyed, hundreds of miles worth of roads, hundreds of people died, and 1/3 of the city's entire population was rendered homeless by this fire. And yet, in rapid succession in the years to come, the city was rebuilt without federal aid. There was no FEMA central planners to tell private citizens to stand back and wait for help. Americans just got up and got the job done. We acted like adults. We took responsibility for our tragic circumstances, came together, and made it happen. Just like these guys and gals are stepping up to the plate even now. But we'd have even more if A, the federal government wasn't taking so much of our money to begin with and squandering it, and B, not actively interfering with our efforts to do so. And frankly, C, luring us into a false sense of security, like Lucy holding the football for Charlie Brown to come and kick one more time. Oh, we got you, Charlie. Go on, I've got you ready. We got your back. This is the worst safety net in the world. So, what happened? Private people stepped forward. Charities stepped forward. One of our major cities, Chicago, virtually leveled. In just 2 years, the downtown was completely rebuilt and rebuilt back better than ever. One such example is a guy by the name of Gordon Saltonstall Hubbard. These are the names lost to history. If I had new kids, I'd name one of them Gordon Saltonstall. But he was an executive in the insurance industry, and with 1/3 of the city destroyed, insurance was getting crushed. A lot of people couldn't get repayment for their claims. And so he went into his personal fortune to help his customers recover. That's what you do when you have a civil society. And that is what gets crowded out by government central planners claiming they're there to help. There is one other problem that I think we've all seen in spades, and it really is a kind of sign of decadence in our government and in our society, but especially in our government. And that is, when you're playing with other people's money, it really turns into a lot of playing around. So what has FEMA been doing instead of building a world-class organization? Well, it's been doing a lot of what we've seen a lot of our government do, which is get involved in woke nonsense.
LGBTQIA people and people who have been disadvantaged already are struggling.
You know, the shift that we're seeing right now is a shift in emergency management from utilitarian principles where everything is designed for the greatest good for the greatest amount of people to disaster equity.
Again, this is an internal training seminar at FEMA, and we've got to move away from executing utilitarian principles, or which you could just say is like caring about consequences, like doing the greatest good for the greatest many, to
disaster equity.
Disaster equity.
It is our lowest income communities and our communities of color that are most impacted by these extreme conditions and impacted by issues that are not of their own making.
I don't know why one would think that the color of your skin impacts you from a natural disaster standpoint more than anyone else. Your economic circumstances do, but there's plenty of poor white folks out there too. This is nonsense, but this is what you get when you have a playground of money that has been taken from we the people and put into a pot for you to mess around with. That's the last piece of the puzzle that sucks. We acquiesce to this. We set our expectations that these agencies should do something for us or that they can. How about we make sure that we've got budget reserves for what's coming next? No, it's all disaster equity. So what's the lesson from all this? I think we have to become preppers. I think that's the facts. We are either going to be prepared ourselves, or we should be prepared to be disappointed and be devastated by the unforeseen. That's the facts. We don't face the choice. We cannot choose dramatically better government performance in times like these. The reason why our politics is so broken, the reason why we have such little trust in these institutions is because we are expecting things they can't do, literally. And then we're letting them keep the money and turn into woke, commie gobbledygook. And we should be angry about that. But the answer isn't just vote in the right people. It's take away their money. That's the only path we've got. And when we've taken it away, we should store it up for ourselves so that we as individuals and families, as best we can, are prepared for disaster. And when our neighbors and the people in our community aren't prepared or can't prepare, we should become the redneck Air Force. We should step into the breach, especially if you're a man, because this is what we're built for, and lend a helping hand and do the best we can and help as many people that are within our vicinity as we have the ability to do. And when we do that, it turns out it enriches our lives, because disaster befalls all of us. We're all going to die someday one way or another. And the kind of life we've lived and how we think about that life is largely marked by how we've served other people in times of need like this. That is how I'd like to sign off on this Friday. That we are stronger together. Not we the government, we the people. You, me, our community, our family, our kids, our relatives, our friends, and even the guy at the end of the block that's a pain in the ass.
Donkey.
We've got to do this together. We've got to grow up and realize that none of these people are coming to save the day. But what do you think? Please let me know in the comment section below. I jump in every time to engage with you guys. I hope this has been helpful. And most of all, I hope any and all of you who are in the middle of this disaster in North Carolina down to Tampa and Florida, that you are safe, that you have people to help you, or that you are helping your fellow man. If I was there, I would be doing it alongside you. And God bless you. Have a great weekend.